Welcome to this workshop on injuries and prevention. You're speaking to Rickard Rikrok from Sweden and
Susanna Piculell, also from Sweden.
And we put this together with input from psychologist Emelie Kazemi also. And I want to give a big shout out to Loudbase, Hiphop, Induction Africa, bboy Invincible for always being so fierce. So let's have a quick peek at who we are. This is me, Rikrok. By my side is Susanna. We will be covering, talking a little bit about ourselves, and the topic is injuries in prevention, but mainly about the headline "Can't Stop, Won't Stop." In terms of why do we push breaking and crack so we can't can't keep on dancing. Our goal is to help you keep on dancing without breaking, basically, keeping fresh. So Susanna.
Yes. So just a quick introduction of myself. My name is Susanna, and I'm working in Lund and Malmö in Sweden as a physiotherapist. So part-time I'm working with young and aspiring performers at a gymnasium, upper secondary high school. And I'm also working in Malmö at a sports clinic. So I'm specialized in sports and also performing arts medicine.
Cool, and I'm Rikrok. I'm with the Breaking Association Malmö, or BAM. Been a b-boy for 12 years, been teaching, organizing, project managing, and together with the good friends we started BAM recently, a year and a half ago, a non-profit organization, and I'm connected to Lagos and Nigeria through Victor, bboy Invincible, since 2 or 3 years back when I went to Lagos for an exchange. Also had his friend JC over in Sweden. So this is part 3, where we involve in your festival, Hiphop Induction Africa. Want to give you the headlines. There are 8 headlines. We're going to talk about some training sessions. What is training sessions in breaking? Just diving into how we differ from other styles. B-boys, you all have a clue, but let's break this down. Then we're going to switch over to injuries, statistics, about some causes of injuries and how to prevent them. We will be diving into some mental aspects and long-term physical and mental health. Going to look at structured practice. Topic is additional training, and finally some mind coping strategies. All this to keep you going. So, training session. Normal setup for a b-boy is wherever you go, we play random choice of music. Funk, could be up tempo, could be mixtapes, could be specific songs, could be chill music towards more high energy. Mainly we do warm up. I see a lot of b-boys don't do warm up. Some breakers go to top rocks, some don't. There could be solo practices or ciphers. People use rubber bands, go to do some physiotherapy. Maybe there is some body weight strengths and stretches to get mobilized. From that, we usually do some down rocks and do our freeze basics before we dive into our personalized techniques that we want to repeat and do variations on. Sometimes at practice we do ciphers, sometimes no, depending on. And randomly I see b-boys, b-girls do stretching, maybe no. Sometimes randomly body weight strengths, sometimes no. But we all basically target to self-improve and practice for upcoming jams or competitions, or just to keep in shape for ciphers, depending on if you're a cipher cat or a battlehead. The dance floor could vary highly, and the environment also. Could be concrete, could be hard pressed soil, could be a high class dance studio with dynamic wooden floor and stuff, but normal setup. Breaking differ from other styles, of course, we know it, but Specifically, it's non-choreographed. It's very random and high degree of self-motivation and drive, and generally it's not supervised by a coach. Each one teach one, guys. People develop their own personal style. Of course, we're talking about intermediate and advanced b-boys and b-girls in this end. We do multiple spins, top rocks, down rocks, power moves. We do overbend our knees, specifically different from other dance style. They're very careful about their knees. We're in contact with floor. Other dancers, they very much avoid floor contact due to the risk. We slide and jump also, much more than other dance styles. Very specific is our power moves, high tension on muscles and joints. And we have impacts that require high degree of precision control to avoid them. We do very high speed combinations, very different from other styles. And the benefit is you get a high score in terms of competing, but it also implies a high risk, different from other styles. So let's talk about this topic, and Susanna will enter talking about the injury statistics, causes, and prevention.
So what we wanted to just mention before we dive into more about injuries when it comes to breaking, we also find it's very important to mention that when it comes to science, what we know within science when we've been researching about breaking and injuries, we know very little about breaking. So we know a little about sports in general, mainly soccer. Then we know quite not very much about dancing. And then it's breaking, which is even smaller. So looking into what we've found through some articles on the web, and also the few published literatures that in the science that is out there, is what has been seen is that types of injuries that's been reported in breaking are like general trauma, when you hit and fall and get bruises, also bone fractures. Then there's different kinds of distortions in joints coming from instability or leading to instability, or joints getting out of place as in luxations. But a big part is also just overuse problems that results in strains and sprains of muscles, and also that overuse in joints and tendons getting overused, which is called tendinopathies. So when there has been a study on breaking amateur breakdancers, where they've also looked at the amount and of injuries and also different parts of the body, and these are the areas that seems to be mostly injured. It's knees, wrists, shoulders, neck, fingers, lower back, and ankle. And what we see here in green is also where it differs quite a lot between females and males, where it's seen that females tend to get more, or at least in this study, females tended to get more problems around fingers, whilst males got more problems around their shoulders, for instance. So when in this literature, they draw some conclusions about some factors that might result into injury. Could be possibly that there's not an adequate warm-up, maybe the physical conditioning is not structured right or not enough. And again, that it can be also linked to not enough coaching or education. It's also, they differ a bit between factors that are more into the one person herself, like intrinsic factors, and also extrinsic factors that affect you from outside. As Rickard just mentioned, like the flooring can be a problem, or if you use equipment or not. But one thing that they really highlight is that the yearly amount of training, the training volume, was the biggest and most significant determinant of the number of injuries that the b-boys or b-girls that they got. And And when we're looking at sports in general, acute injuries to the knee joints are common in all sports that require twisting movements and sudden changes of direction, such as in soccer, for instance. But that could also be one risk factor in breaking, since there's obviously a lot of those movements. And when it comes to common injuries to the common factors that are linked to wrist injuries is often falls on outstretched hands, which we would also see obviously in breakdancing, breaking. These authors in this article also concluded 3 big conclusions around that we should take home when looking at injuries in amateur b-boys and b-girls. It was that there's a need for better education amongst these dancers, and when it comes to like, should we use equipment or not, should we warm up, and how should we warm up. Also that in this study they did not see a link with how additional training or strength training could prevent injuries in breakdancers. But the biggest, again, the thing that they highlight is this, that the training time is the most clear factor associated with injury. And what is also important to remember, again, this is one study, and lack of evidence on something is also not, doesn't mean it is an evidence.
Yeah, basically what we're saying is that warm up and cool down and doing additional strength training could help you, but there is no evidence that it does. In this small study, a bigger study could prove that it's really required. Of course, in other sports, you see the connection.
Further authors or physiotherapists working within breaking have also concluded that they see a pattern where possible causes of injuries could be that there is a big pressure through when it is a lot of jumps and spins, which puts a lot of pressure on the joints and the body. And there also an imbalance between load and the capacity of the structures. So you might be very strong on the one side and not as so strong on the other side, or with different parts of the body. And also that it's very repetitive sometimes, that we keep just repeat, rehearse the same movement all over again, which is a habit which might lead to problems within the body. Also that it's a type of training that puts, again, high load impact. And some reasons, some possible causes of injuries can also be that the technique is a bit lacking, and again that we are within breaking, we don't protect ourselves against this high impact. And then obviously there is a risk of trauma when landing erroneously or in spinning and sliding. Malalignment is when we don't align our joints, we don't put feet, knee, hips in line, which might put our joints into torsion. So further reasons is, again, this imbalance that I just mentioned, or again, if there's a non-specific warm-up, that we go back into injury too soon, back into training too soon after an injury, that the rehab might not be sufficient. And again, this training with no supervision, no one teaching you correct technique. And again, the physical capacity is not strong enough to handle the load that you put it into, so you're not prepared enough. And another problem can also be like pushing yourself very hard when you're very tired, when you're very fatigued. That's also what we see in sports in general, that injuries often come when we do really hard stuff, when we're really tired and not completely aligned in our body. And again, if we're using our external resources or not, such as knee pads and mattress. Another thing that is good to think about when it comes to injury prevention and how we work when it comes to within the medicine and science is that to be order to prevent something, we need to learn how big is the problem. We also need to learn what possible factors and mechanisms may play part in these injuries, and from there we can take out how can we prevent this, and from there we need to evaluate, does these measures do anything, by repeating the first step again. So once again we look at the extent of the problem.
Yeah, let me fill in there. That means that in this workshop we can tell you exactly how to prevent your specific injuries, because we're talking in general terms, because we don't know the extent of your problem and your factors and mechanisms.
Yeah, so we have just started in when it comes to breaking, we're just in the very start of looking at the extent of the problem.
All right, so let's summarize the physical aspects. What we basically want to know about you guys is you need to decide, are you going to get injured? And if that's so, what should you do instead right now? Or maybe you're injured, you have an old injury that is keeping you from pushing, and then you should be talking about how do you get back physically. So let's dive into the mental aspects. There's some potential psychological risk factors for sport injuries. One is that you have a life stress. Could be that you're missing social support. Could be that when you're in need, you don't really know how to cope, to take good care of yourself. Could be your motivational climate, performance, or you need to master. Maybe personality could be a risk factor. That is, if you are looking for perfectionism and it's never good enough. These are risks in all sports injuries, not specifically for breaking, but you guys might draw some connections to other b-boys and b-girls. What we want to talk about is long-term physical and mental health, specifically about overload, as we could see that this was a specific factor that could be there was evidence for. So we found this article in a sports magazine where two specialists in the Swedish Olympic Committee were talking about sports in general, how much is too much. And in the pyramid you can see that you need to start from the bottom, working your way up. And is your load too high? Before you look in, do I need to improve my stamina? Do I need to become stronger or more mobile? Or do I have the athleticism? Before you start thinking, is my technique wrong? Then you should go back to your athleticism and so on. Top line is, man, I've been there myself. We put some protection on, or we use tiger balm, or something that makes it maybe it feels good because for some reason, but basically it's the load adaptation that is significant. And if you can't acknowledge that you're overloading, or if you don't see that you really need to accept that you're fatigued and do 1 day of recovery, that's really significant. From previous slides, we saw that personality traits, this is from the article again, personality traits could lead to fatigue syndrome, where you totally crash physically and mentally. Could be excessive or negative perfectionism. Take an Olympic athlete in any way that just keeps pushing. Some people make it and they do a medal, but a lot of people break. Could be self-criticism, or could be considering your self-esteem and your drive to excel. The importance of insight is high, and you need to do reflection, and we need mentoring to be able to help ourselves become objective.
So we look at the base, that the base is about having creating the right adaptation and to have a good structure in our practice. Because if we want to get better, we need to train hard, we need to overload. And the overload is what makes us stronger. But we won't be able to get stronger and build up if we don't get the right recovery. So that if you look at this picture, it's about that when we train, we reduce capacity a little because we put load on our body. But with the right amount of recovery, the body will super compensate and get stronger next time you put it into the same amount of stress. And we want this to go into a positive direction. So just one thing that we think is important to highlight when it comes to breaking is to create a structured practice. And I think a couple of things to think about is, okay, about warm-up, for instance, since it's been pushed in the literature. It is actually not so very well known how it is related to injuries or not if we warm up. But however, there are things that points us into the direction to learn that it is enhancing our performance. So therefore, there might be a good reason to warm up even within breaking. But you need also to consider how should I warm up to be the best performer as I want to become. Another problem that's been highlighted, as we mentioned before, is the repetitive way of practice. So think about when you practice, can I increase more variety in my practice? Can I practice something a couple of times and then practice something else and then return to my problem, so that I introduce more variety in my training? Another problem that I mentioned was training and pushing hard into exhaustion. So think about, like, when I do my hardest move, can I avoid the risk of being exhausted in that direction? Or can I train myself in a good way so that I'm better to cope with pushing myself really hard when I'm really tired? Another thing when it comes to structure, again, as I mentioned, is the recovery. So it's when we recover that we build and get stronger. So we need to put that in somewhere, somehow, and having some kind of plan with that. And also remember that the recovery is part of your training. You won't get stronger, or you will most likely get more efficiently stronger and better, perform better, if you have a professional kind of recovery. And the three things that I want to really push there is the food, like eating and getting energy in. If you lose energy, you need to replace it again. Sleep is just growing more and more. It's just a growing topic on how important that is for us. So do I sleep? Do I eat? Those two things has to be in there somewhere, somehow. And sometimes it might also be good to do something completely else, to shift mind focus, shift body focus, so that you can deload and reload and come back. Another thing when it comes to structure is just be well prepared physically. So a big factor that's highlighted in sports medicine literature is how sudden increases of load are linked to injuries. So can I prepare myself in the long term? If I know I'm having a camp or a battle far ahead, I need to plan long way back to get strong to handle this increased load. And also be aware of your body, be aware of your practice. Consider all kinds of load, not only the physical load, as we mentioned before. Also, life stress and psychological stress is a kind of stress. A way to keep check on all this could be, for instance, to put a diary and have a training log where you rate your RPE, you rate a perceived assertion, like how hard you think it is, 0 to 10 you rate, or your perceived recovery status scale. That is, again, like I'm 10, 100% recovered, or 0, I'm not recovered at all. And that is a good link to how much I can expect from myself. You can also log things like how long do you train, how often do you train, what do you train, do you sleep, how well do you sleep, subjective stuff, how do I feel, did it feel great or not so good or really bad, and do I have any physical symptoms. So
Okay, let's dive into physical demands of breaking. We know that we all need to, we have different focuses. We work on how fast we are, how strong we are in our explosiveness, the repetitions in power moves, how and our endurance could be how many rounds can we go in when we have air, or how long and strong can we be without air when we're crumped together and the lungs are burning. What about our techniques? And basically, what we need to think about is what you need to practice. What is your profile? Is it high on speed? Is that what you want to do? Do you want to focus on your endurance? Is it your technique? So when you build your structure and plan your additional strength training, consider what your profile is and your physical demands, where you want to improve.
Because there is also growing when it comes to sports in general, that there might be a good reason to have some additional training to be able, again, to handle the load, to be able to train hard and a lot. And when it comes to breaking, when breaking is being compared with other dance styles, it is, I mean, you can probably feel it yourself, but it's also in the literatures proof that breaking is a physically very hard dance style. So that also speaks for a reason why we need to get physically very strong. And when it comes to literature looking at dancers and strength and injury, it's not enough evidence and knowledge to say what is what. But again, when it looks to additional strength in sports in general, there seems to be a lot of reasons why we might put that in. And also, both looking at in dancers and in sports in general, there has not been seen any negative effects or adverse effects from additional training to the dancing. So, because I find that, and I see that a lot within dancing in general, that there is a reluctance to add extra strength training on, because there is some sort of a worry that would put me into bulky muscles or make me stiff. But according to these literatures looking at strength training and injuries and performance, there has not been seen any negative effects such as. So how should you strength train? So one factor that is important to think about is that you need to have some kind of specificity. So specificity means that you will be good at what you do. So if you want to build power, you need to train power. If you want to build strong shoulders, wrists and knees, you need to work on your shoulders, wrists and knees. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go into the gym and dance around in the gym to be specific. You can lift high and heavy loads and still be specific if your aim is to build maximum strength or power. And another thing you need to think about is how often if you want to do additional training, how often should you do it? And a general recommendation is usually about 2 times a week to get some good benefit from it. And for some people that can seem quite a lot to add on 2 times a week extra strength training. But you can also work it in period. You can use periodization. So you might work with extra strength training for a couple of weeks or a couple of months, and then you can shift to a different focus. So that could be a way to work with it.
Yeah, cool. Also, we want to mention that there is actually an equation, a calculation of how much you can increase your frequency or your intensity in your training over a period of time before the risk of injuries is getting really, really high. So, for example, over a 4-week period, you shouldn't add more training than somewhere around 25 or 30%. Because if you increase too much over a short period of time, the risk is really, really high. Take, for instance, the average b-boy and b-girl. you're entering a battle, and you know, so maybe 4 weeks ahead, because maybe it just popped out, you got the idea, and now you're into the lab and working really hard, and you're doubling or tripling your amount of training. This is really high risk, and very common, I would say, in breaking, where you need to plan your increases way ahead. But let's dive into mind coping strategies, and talk about mental health. Some of these topics we'll dive into is what about your life compass in general? Where are you in life? And talk about what could mental unhealth be. We're gonna talk a little about behavior, and when do we perform our best. Talking about handling stress system and strategies. But basically about the life compass, all these should be equally big in terms of how you feel mentally. That means that we all need to have, if we have health, we're not sick or ill, we're pretty much okay, but we also need to have relations to our family and friends, and not have feeling alone. Work and education, it helps us feel better, and if there is no leisure time or spare time, it could be very unbalanced. So the trick is to balance all of these in a kind of wheel of life, and consider, if you're feeling bad, is something missing, can you do something about it, and not overcompensating. Some people dive into work when they have, and they miss out on their relations. Some people think spare time is more important than relations, well, basically, if you're sick or ill, nothing else really matters as much, because it will feel unbalanced. So it's like getting oxygen in an airplane. In terms of helping your peers around you, you need to get your oxygen first, and become stable and balanced. So could be controversial, but mental unhealth from a psychologist point of view is your internal and external behavior, where external could be what we see on the outside. It should be, if someone is angry and not showing it, it's inner, but the external is what we will do if we yell, if we throw things, when we act, and what we do. The inner behavior is the one that is hidden. It's what we think and how we feel, and you can have physical reactions, like your heart is racing, your skin will be maybe changing color, or you get a chemical imbalance. But what's really important is that our behavior, internal and internal, is regulating our health, and there is a connection to your injuries. Depending on how you cope, because we all have behavior, external and interior. If we can't cope them, if we don't have strategies, could lead us towards injuries, and that would be a way of physical and mental unhealth. So sometimes the problem isn't that you feel that problem. Maybe sometimes the solution is a problem. That means if you don't have a strategy in taking care of yourself, and you do something else, maybe that your solution is what's causing injuries. Important input from an insight from psychologists.
So what might be important to, when we talk about stress and our mental health, is that we have, in the nervous system, we have like our nervous system that is linked to our muscles and makes us do what we do and we move. But we also have an autonomous nervous system that is automatic, that acts on us without our necessarily wanting it to act in a certain way. And so the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system are part of this automatic nervous system that regulates how we act within stress and or in recovery when we rest. And mental health is a lot about having a balance between these. So we need the sympathetic actions to be stressed, to feel some kind of arousal, to act, to fight, to fly, to have this fight or flight reaction, because sometimes we need to flee, sometimes we need to fight, even in daily life. The problem is when the sympathetic never turns off and the parasympathetic system never turns on, so we don't get our recovery. That is why when we sometimes get stuck in this wheel of feeling that we are within threat, or we need to perform all the time. And in the long term, that can also lead to an overreaction in the parasympathetic system, so that we actually go into some kind of exhaustion, or we just freeze. So we can talk about stress as in fight, flight, but also freeze, that where we just feel like we're exhausted, we give up, and we don't want to do anything.
Okay, behavior. We really can't control our emotion and our physical reaction, basically, because something happens around us, and we do think and feel directly, subconsciously. But what we can do is control our behavior, how to relate to our emotions and thoughts, and to maintain our health. It's very important, I think, to maintain and behave according to our values, our core values, what's good in us, and always consider our health mentally and physically, and care for ourselves. There is behavior triangle that is interesting to view. That is that all actions, emotions, and thoughts, they trigger each other, and just go around. You can feel something that will directly make you behave in a specific way. You can think something, not have the time to consider how you feel about it, and go directly into behavior. I mean, that's me, a typical b-boy. When I'm in a battle, I think and I directly behave, but sometimes how we behave will affect how we feel on the opposite, and it will trigger how we think, and also how we feel could go directly to how we behave, and skip till how we think. So all these are connected, could go either way. Interesting to consider. And knowing this, we could look into handling stress systems and different strategies towards that. One is short for soul, is to be able to stop and observe, and be object, take a step back. Some things need to be accepted and being let go. That is, my elbow is broken. Maybe I shouldn't continue right now. Sometimes a strategy could be doing a mind shift focus from thinking about the problem to turning towards a solution. Could be, if you're really worried and stressed out, try and plan it, and really put your worries together in one moment in the day, and then you worry. And the rest of the day you could be free of your worries because you already had a moment of them. It could be if something is really making you anxious, we can work on practicing of getting rid of it, facing it, or talking about it. Recovery is an excellent strategy. Meditation and mindfulness, and sometimes just taking a deep breath, count slowly, and thinking of peace, is one strategy. Muscle relaxation, progressive, that means that you could be lying down. That is a way of meditating. And practice focusing on relaxing one muscle at a time. And sometimes it's taking your step back. You could be visualizing of what you want to achieve instead of repeating and pushing. Could be an interesting strategy. What I want to ask you guys is, for real, how are you guys, brothers and sisters? in terms of breakdancing, I mean, I'm so happy when I'm going breaking. It's a time of my life, but sometimes it brings me back from my behavior. It brings me back to, okay, now I'm feeling things, and then I can start thinking. Uh, I've learned that I'm addressing my problems, but for real, how are you guys? Are you really balanced in your life? Is your pushing getting injured due to an unbalance, or do you need more structure in your life or training? Or are you really taking care of yourself, guys? Sometimes eat and sleep is not something we can choose. But are you doing the best of it and really recovering when you need to, instead of going into fatigue syndrome? And do you have strategies when you know that, when you can address what's maybe where the imbalance is, so that you can cope and keep pushing? Because guys, in this context, I would say that I know you can't stop dancing, and you shouldn't. Definitely, you should be pushing, breaking, but I don't want you to get injured, because in a way you're all superheroes, because you're in the most difficult dance form there is, in terms of how we're doing athletically. Uh, yeah, we are the athletes of God, but we're not godlike and invincible, except Victor Invincible, of course. He really is invincible. But we need to keep pushing to our max, but also sometimes taking a step back and be smart, guys.
Another way of thinking is, I heard this from a coach in running who was talking about, like, you can look at it as train as much as possible without getting injured, or you can also look at it as train as little as possible and still perform at your best.
Cool. That would be it for this 40-minute workshop in injuries in prevention. God bless you all, guys. Take care and peace.